The smell of overpriced craft beer and burning hamburgers filled the air as I stood at the edge of our cul-de-sac's annual block party, watching my wife Sarah flirt with every man within a 50-foot radius. At 38, I'd grown accustomed to being treated like furniture at these neighborhood gatherings, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the humiliation had teeth. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. "Oh, there's my husband." Sarah's voice cut through the evening air like a rusty knife. She was standing near the drinks table with Monica Patterson, the self-appointed queen bee of Maple Grove Circle, and Chad Williams, our annoyingly successful neighbor who owned 3 luxury cars and never let anyone forget it. "Come over here, honey. We were just talking about your little computer business." The way she said little made my jaw clench. 6 months ago, my IT consulting firm had gone under after losing 2 major clients to a competitor who undercut my prices by 40%. Since then, I'd been doing freelance tech support for elderly neighbors and small businesses, barely making enough to cover my half of the mortgage on our overpriced suburban home. I forced a smile and walked over, my sneakers squeaking against the pavement. Everyone else was dressed in expensive casual wear, polo shirts that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, designer jeans, and watches that could feed a family for months. I was wearing a 5-year-old button-down from Target and khakis with a small stain near the pocket that I'd tried unsuccessfully to scrub out. "Hi there," I said, nodding to Monica and Chad. "Great party." Monica's smile was sharper than broken glass. "Oh, it really is. We were just discussing how important it is to have realistic expectations in business. Chad was telling us about his latest venture. He's expanding his tech company into 3 new markets this quarter." Chad puffed out his chest, his polo shirt straining against muscles that probably cost him $500 a month in personal trainer fees. "Yeah, the key is knowing when to take risks and when to play it safe. Some people just don't have the instincts for entrepreneurship." Sarah laughed, a sound that used to make me feel warm inside, but now felt like ice water in my veins. "That's so true. I keep telling David that maybe he should consider getting a regular job again. You know, something stable, with benefits." The conversation continued around me as if I were invisible. Monica mentioned her husband's promotion at the law firm. Chad talked about his vacation home in the Hamptons. Sarah discussed her recent raise at the insurance company where she worked as a senior claims adjuster. I stood there, sipping warm beer from a plastic cup, feeling like a ghost haunting his own life. "Well, I should probably go check on the grill," I said finally, looking for any excuse to escape. "Oh, don't worry about that," Chad said, slapping me on the shoulder with enough force to make me stumble slightly. "Real men are handling the cooking tonight. Why don't you go help the ladies with the potato salad or something?" The laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. Sarah didn't defend me. She didn't even look uncomfortable. She just smiled and sipped her wine like she was watching a mildly entertaining television show. I walked away, my face burning with embarrassment and anger. The party continued around me, kids running between tables, neighbors gossiping about property values and school districts, the constant background hum of suburban satisfaction. I found myself at the drinks table, pouring another beer with hands that shook slightly. "Rough crowd tonight." I turned to find Rachel Williams, Chad's wife, standing beside me. She was beautiful in an effortless way that made Sarah's carefully applied makeup and designer clothes look desperate by comparison. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing jeans and a plain white t-shirt that somehow looked more elegant than anything else at the party. "Oh, hi, Rachel. Yeah, it's quite the gathering." She poured herself a glass of wine and studied me with intelligent brown eyes. "You know, I've always wondered something about you, David." "What's that?" "Are you single?" I nearly choked on my beer. "What? No, I'm married to Sarah. You know that." Rachel's smile was mysterious. "I know what the paperwork says, but watching you two tonight. Well, let's just say if you ever decide to change your relationship status, I know someone who might be interested in asking you out." Before I could respond, she walked away, leaving me standing there with my mouth hanging open like an idiot. I looked around to see if anyone had overheard our conversation, and my blood turned cold. Sarah was standing about 10 feet away, holding 2 wine glasses, her face pale with shock. Our eyes met across the crowded party, and I saw something I'd never seen before in her expression. Fear. That night, Sarah barely spoke to me. She went through her usual routine, removing her makeup, brushing her teeth, checking her phone, with mechanical precision, but I could feel the tension radiating from her like heat from a furnace. When she finally climbed into bed beside me, she turned away without saying goodnight. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and replaying Rachel's words. "Someone who might be interested in asking you out? What did that mean? And why had Sarah looked so frightened when she overheard? By 3 a.m, I'd made a decision. I slipped out of bed, grabbed my laptop from the home office, and settled into the kitchen table. Sarah's phone was charging on the counter, and I knew her password, our anniversary date, which she'd never bothered to change despite my repeated warnings about digital security. I felt like a creep going through her messages, but something about the whole evening didn't add up. Sarah had been cruel to me before, but never quite so publicly. And that look of fear when Rachel mentioned someone being interested in me? It took me 20 minutes to find what I was looking for. A text thread between Sarah and Monica that made my stomach drop through the floor. Monica, Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Still can't believe you're going through with this. What if he finds out? Sarah, Tuesday, 3:52 p.m. He won't. David's too busy feeling sorry for himself to notice anything. Besides, it's not like we're hurting anyone. He's been dead weight for months. Monica, Tuesday, 4:15 p.m. Chad says you two have amazing chemistry. Maybe you should just divorce David and make it official. Sarah, Tuesday, 4:18 p.m. And give up half of everything? No thanks. I worked too hard to get where I am. This arrangement works fine for now. I scrolled up, finding weeks of messages detailing an affair between my wife and Chad Williams, photos, explicit descriptions of their encounters, plans to meet at hotels while I was out doing tech support calls, jokes about my failures, my appearance, my complete obliviousness to what was happening in my own marriage. The worst part wasn't the betrayal, it was the contempt. They wrote about me like I was a pathetic joke, someone too stupid and worthless to deserve basic honesty. Sarah had been playing the role of dutiful wife while secretly planning a future that didn't include me, waiting for the right moment to discard me like an old appliance. I took screenshots of everything, uploaded them to a secure cloud account, and put her phone back exactly where I'd found it. Then I sat in the dark kitchen, drinking coffee and planning my next move. By the time Sarah woke up, I had a strategy. "Good morning, honey," I said cheerfully as she stumbled into the kitchen, still in her pajamas. "Sleep well?" She looked at me suspiciously. "Fine. You're up early." Couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Rachel said last night. Sarah's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "What about it?" "Just seemed like an odd thing to say, don't you think? About someone being interested in asking me out. I mean, who could she have been talking about?" "I have no idea." Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "Probably just making conversation." "Maybe." I smiled and kissed her cheek, enjoying the way she flinched. "Well, I'm off to help Mrs. Chen with her computer. Should be back around 3. I left her sitting at the kitchen table, staring into her coffee like it might contain answers to questions she was afraid to ask. My first stop wasn't Mrs. Chen's house. It was the gym where Chad worked out every morning at exactly 7:30. I'd done my research over the past few months, noting his routines and habits with the same attention to detail I'd once applied to network security protocols. I found him at the bench press, grunting his way through what was probably his third set of the morning. Without his expensive clothes and the admiring audience of neighborhood wives, he looked smaller somehow, more ordinary. "Chad, what a coincidence." He looked up, sweat dripping down his face. "Oh, hey David, didn't expect to see you here." "I've been thinking about getting back in shape. You know how it is. Got to stay competitive in today's market." I sat down on the bench next to him, close enough that he couldn't ignore me. "Speaking of competition, I wanted to thank you for the advice last night." "What advice?" "About knowing when to take risks and when to play it safe. Really got me thinking about my business strategy." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "And my personal life." Chad's eyes darted around the gym, looking for escape routes. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Oh, I think you do." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the screenshots I'd taken, a photo Sarah had sent him 2 weeks ago. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The color drained from his face. "David, I can explain." "No need." I stood up, pocketing my phone. "But here's some free advice about risk management. When you are playing games with other people's lives, make sure you are prepared for them to start playing back." I walked away, leaving him sitting on the bench with a 45-pound weight in his hands and a look of pure panic in his eyes. Word travels fast in suburban neighborhoods, especially when it involves scandal. By the end of the week, I could feel the shift in how people looked at me. Conversations stopped when I approached. Invitations to neighborhood gatherings mysteriously failed to materialize. Even my few remaining friends began treating me with the careful politeness usually reserved for people with terminal illnesses. The first casualty was my friendship with Tom Bradley, a guy I'd known since college who lived 3 blocks away. We used to play poker twice a month and grab beers after work. When I called to see if he wanted to catch a game at the sports bar, his response was colder than I'd ever heard it. Look, David, I think it's better if we take a break for a while. This whole situation with you and Sarah, it's getting pretty messy, and Jennifer doesn't want me getting involved. What situation? What are you talking about? Come on, man. Everyone knows you've been making accusations about Chad and causing drama in the neighborhood. Monica told Jennifer that you've been harassing them, going through Sarah's personal stuff, making threats. That's not cool. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Tom, that's not what happened. Sarah's having an affair with Chad, and I have proof. I don't want to hear it. His voice was firm. Whatever problems you and Sarah are having, you need to work them out between yourselves. Don't drag the rest of us into it. The line went dead. My next call was to Jake Morrison, another friend from my college days who worked in IT for a local bank. Surely he would understand the importance of evidence, of facts over gossip. Jake, I need to talk to someone who'll listen to reason. Can we meet for coffee? There was a long pause. David, I heard about what's been going on. Look, I feel bad for you, I really do. But Michelle and I have decided we need to stay out of this whole mess. What mess? I'm the victim here. That's not how Monica tells it. She says you've been stalking Chad, going through Sarah's phone, making everyone in the neighborhood uncomfortable. She's worried you might be having some kind of breakdown. The betrayal was breathtaking. Monica had somehow spun the narrative to make me the villain in my own story. Jake, you've known me for 15 years. Do you really think I'm the kind of person who would... I don't know what to think anymore, but I do know that getting involved in other people's marriage problems never ends well. I'm sorry, David. I hope you get the help you need. Another dial tone. Another friendship sacrificed on the altar of neighborhood politics. By the weekend, I was completely isolated. Sarah had returned to her normal routine, acting like nothing had happened while secretly coordinating with Monica to paint me as an unstable husband having a midlife crisis. Chad had apparently told people that I'd threatened him at the gym, though he'd conveniently left out the part about the evidence I'd shown him. I was sitting in my home office, staring at my computer screen and wondering how my life had become such a disaster when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I could see Tom, Jake, and two other neighbors, Mike Patterson, Monica's husband, and Steve Chen, standing on my front porch with expressions that looked like they were attending a funeral. I opened the door, already knowing this wasn't going to be a friendly visit. David, Tom said, his voice carefully controlled, we need to talk. About what? About the fact that you're making everyone in this neighborhood uncomfortable, Mike Patterson said, stepping forward. He was a big man, a lawyer who specialized in corporate litigation, and he had the kind of presence that made people nervous. My wife is scared to leave the house because of your erratic behavior. My erratic behavior? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your wife helped orchestrate an affair between my wife and Chad Williams, and I'm the problem? See, this is exactly what we're talking about, Steve Chen interjected. He was usually the peacemaker in neighborhood disputes, but today his face was hard with disapproval. These wild accusations, this paranoid thinking, it's not healthy, David. Jake stepped forward, and for a moment I thought he might be there to support me. Instead, he pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a text message. Monica forwarded this to Michelle. It's from Sarah, talking about how worried she is about your mental state. She says you've been going through her personal belongings, following her to work, making threats against Chad. She's scared, David. We're all scared. I stared at the message, recognizing Sarah's phone number, but hardly believing the words. She had completely fabricated a story about me stalking and threatening her, creating evidence of abuse that didn't exist while hiding the real evidence of her affair. This is insane, I said. She's lying. I can prove it. With what? More screenshots you claim to have found on her phone? Tom shook his head. Even if that stuff was real, which I doubt, going through your wife's private messages without permission is a violation of trust. It's controlling behavior. So is having an affair. Alleged affair, Mike corrected, based on evidence you obtained illegally by hacking into her personal accounts. Do you have any idea how that looks from a legal perspective? The irony was suffocating. I was being lectured about legal and ethical behavior by people who were helping cover up adultery and character assassination. They had turned my discovery of the truth into evidence of my instability, my attempts to expose lies into proof that I was the liar. I want you to know that we're here as friends, Steve said, though his tone suggested otherwise. We think you should consider getting professional help, counseling, maybe some medication to help with the paranoia and anger issues. And if I don't, Mike's expression hardened. Then we'll have to consider other options, restraining orders, police involvement, whatever it takes to protect our families from this situation. They left me standing in my doorway, watching four men I'd considered friends walk away like I was radioactive. In the space of a week, I'd gone from respected neighbor to neighborhood pariah, all because I'd discovered the truth about my wife's betrayal. That night, I sat in my office and made a list of everything I'd lost: my business, my friends, my reputation, my marriage, and my place in the community I'd called home for 8 years. Sarah had systematically destroyed my life while playing the role of concerned wife, and she'd done it so skillfully that even people who'd known me for years believed her lies over my evidence. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how much damage a man with nothing left to lose could inflict when he finally decided to stop playing by the rules. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening, exactly 2 weeks after the block party that had started this whole nightmare. I was coming home from a tech support call when I saw them gathered on Tom's front lawn. Tom, Jake, Mike, Steve, and Chad standing in a circle like some kind of suburban tribunal. When they saw my car pull into the driveway, they started walking toward my house. I got out of my car and waited for them on my front walkway, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder and my keys still in my hand. The evening air was thick with humidity and tension. "David," Tom said as they approached, "we need to have a serious conversation." "About what now?" Mike stepped forward, his lawyer instincts taking over. "About the fact that you broke into Chad's car yesterday and left threatening messages on his windshield." I blinked, genuinely confused. "I did what?" "Don't play dumb," Chad said, his voice shaking with either fear or anger. "Someone broke into my Porsche and left printed copies of fake text messages with a note saying, 'Everyone will know the truth.' My car alarm was disabled, and the security cameras at the gym were mysteriously malfunctioned during the exact time it happened." "And you think I did this because?" "Because you're the only one with the technical skills to disable security systems," Jake said, "and you've been harassing Chad for weeks with these insane allegations." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation, being accused of crimes I hadn't committed by people who were covering up crimes that actually happened, struck me as hilariously tragic. "You think this is funny?" Steve demanded. "I think it's perfect," I said, wiping tears from my eyes. "You guys have created this elaborate narrative where I'm the villain, and now you're so committed to it that you're blaming me for things I didn't even do. Did it ever occur to you that maybe someone else knows about Chad's affair and decided to expose it?" "What affair?" Mike's voice was dangerous now. "You keep making these accusations, but you've never provided any real proof." "Because every time I try to show proof, you dismiss it as fake or obtained illegally." I pulled out my phone. "But you know what? I'm done trying to convince you. You want proof? Here's proof." I opened the audio recording app and hit play. Chad's voice filled the evening air, crystal clear and unmistakably his own. "Sarah's husband is such a pathetic loser. I can't believe she stayed married to him this long. When we're together, she tells me how disgusting she finds him, how he can't satisfy her in bed, how he's a failure as a man, how she wishes she'd never married him. She only stays because divorce would be expensive, and she figures it's easier to just keep him around as a roommate while she gets what she needs from me." The recording continued for another minute, with Chad describing intimate details of his relationship with Sarah, including specific dates, locations, and sexual encounters. By the time it finished, the 5 men standing in my yard looked like they'd been hit by a truck. "Where did you get this?" Tom whispered. "From Chad himself. Last week at Murphy's bar when he was drunk and bragging to his buddies about his conquest. Amazing what people will say when they think no one important is listening." I pocketed my phone. There are 3 other recordings, plus photos, plus documented evidence of hotel receipts and credit card charges. But here's the thing. I don't need to convince you anymore. I don't need your friendship or your approval or your permission to handle my own marriage. Chad's face had gone completely white. "David, listen. That recording is taken out of context. Shut up." My voice was quiet, but something in my tone made all 5 men take a step back. "You've spent 2 weeks making me out to be crazy, unstable, dangerous. You've turned my friends against me, isolated me in my own neighborhood, threatened me with police and restraining orders, all to protect a cheating wife and her arrogant boyfriend who think I'm too stupid to figure out what's going on." "We were just trying to help," Jake said weakly. "No, you were trying to avoid uncomfortable truth. It's easier to believe that I'm having a breakdown than to admit that people you like and respect are capable of betrayal and cruelty." I looked at each of them in turn. "But you know what the really funny part is? I never broke into Chad's car. I never left any threatening messages. I've been nothing but civil and restrained, even while you were all treating me like a criminal." "Then who?" Steve started to ask. Maybe it was his wife. Maybe it was someone else he screwed over. Maybe it was just karma finally catching up to him. I shrugged. But it wasn't me. which means you just spent 20 minutes accusing an innocent man of crimes he didn't commit, based on the word of someone you now know is a liar and a cheat. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could see the doubt creeping into their faces, the uncomfortable realization that they might have chosen the wrong side in this conflict. "David," Tom said finally, "if what you're saying is true—" "If," I interrupted. "You just heard Chad's own voice describing his affair with my wife in graphic detail, and you're still saying if. Okay, assuming it's true, what do you want from us?" "I want you to leave me alone. I want you to stop threatening me, stop treating me like a pariah, stop enabling my wife's lies. And most importantly, I want you to remember this moment the next time you're tempted to judge someone without knowing all the facts." I turned to walk toward my house, then paused and looked back at Chad. "Oh, and Chad, you might want to check your own security cameras more carefully. I have a feeling there are going to be a lot more revelations coming to light very soon." I left them standing in my yard, 5 grown men who had just realized they'd been played by a cheating wife and her manipulative best friend. As I walked up my front steps, I could hear them starting to argue among themselves, their unified front crumbling now that the truth was finally out in the open. Inside the house, Sarah was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale and her hands shaking. "I heard voices outside," she said. "What was that about?" I looked at my wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She was still beautiful, still poised, still playing her role as the concerned spouse. But now I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the fear that her carefully constructed lies were starting to unravel. "Just clearing up some misunderstandings with the neighbors," I said. "Nothing you need to worry about." But we both knew that everything was about to change. The beauty of a well-executed plan is that it looks effortless from the outside. Over the next month, I systematically dismantled the lives of everyone who had betrayed me, using nothing more than the truth, patience, and the technical skills that had once made me successful in business. It started with Monica. During my investigation into Sarah's affair, I'd discovered that the queen bee of Maple Grove Circle had some interesting financial secrets. A little social engineering, calling her bank while pretending to be her husband, using information I'd gathered from overheard conversations, revealed that she'd been hiding a serious gambling addiction from Mike. Online poker, sports betting, even cryptocurrency speculation. She'd burned through nearly $40,000 of their savings in 6 months. I didn't expose this information directly. Instead, I created an anonymous email account and sent Mike copies of Monica's online gambling statements, along with screenshots of her betting apps and a simple note. "Thought you should know what your wife does during her lunch breaks." The explosion was audible from 3 houses away. Mike's voice carried across the neighborhood as he confronted Monica about her lies and financial deception. Within a week, she'd moved out of their house and was staying with her mother across town. The neighborhood gossip network that had once served her so well now turned against her with vicious efficiency. Chad was next, and he proved even easier to destroy. His tech company was built on contracts with small businesses who trusted him to handle their digital security. A few well-placed anonymous tips to his biggest clients, complete with evidence of his poor personal judgment and questionable ethics, resulted in 3 major contract cancellations within 2 weeks. When your business is built on trust and reputation, adultery becomes a liability that clients can't afford to ignore. But the masterpiece was what I did to Sarah. Her position at the insurance company depended on her image as a stable, trustworthy professional who could handle sensitive claims and maintain client confidentiality. Insurance companies are notoriously conservative about anything that might reflect poorly on their brand. So when her supervisor received an anonymous package containing printed copies of Sarah's explicit text messages with Chad, along with photos of them together at hotels during work hours, the response was swift and brutal. Sarah was called into a meeting on a Friday afternoon and terminated immediately. Not for the affair itself, but for using company time and resources to conduct personal business and for creating a potential liability if her behavior became public knowledge. They even demanded reimbursement for the hotel expenses she'd charged to her company credit card during her lunch hour rendezvous. The beauty of it was that I never had to lie or fabricate evidence. I simply made sure the right information reached the right people at the right time. Sarah's own choices, her own words, her own actions, they provided all the ammunition I needed. But I saved the best for last. 2 months after the block party that had started this whole ordeal, the neighborhood association organized another gathering, a summer barbecue to celebrate the completion of new playground equipment in the local park. Sarah begged me not to attend, claiming she was too embarrassed to face our neighbors after losing her job. I agreed to stay home, which made her visibly relieved. What she didn't know was that I'd already RSVP'd under a different name. I arrived at the park at sunset, carrying a small Bluetooth speaker and a tablet loaded with audio files. Most of the neighborhood was there. Families with children, elderly couples, teenagers reluctantly dragged along by their parents. The same social hierarchy that had once excluded me was still in place, though Monica's absence and Chad's recent business troubles had shifted the dynamics somewhat. I found a spot near the pavilion where the adults were gathered, close enough to the main sound system that my Bluetooth speaker would sync automatically when I activated it. Then I waited. The opportunity came during the traditional neighborhood announcements, when various residents stood up to discuss community issues, upcoming events, and local news. When there was a brief lull in the conversation, I activated my speaker and pressed play on the first audio file. Chad's voice filled the park, crystal clear and unmistakably his. Sarah's husband is such a pathetic loser. I can't believe she stayed married to him this long. The first recording hit like a thunderclap. Sarah's voice mocking her husband, laughing with Chad about stupid David. Conversations froze, kids stared at their parents, and Chad went white, scanning frantically for the source. By the third clip, the pavilion was silent, except for children playing on distant swings. Misses. Chen finally broke the silence. Well, I suppose that explains a few things. By morning, the audio was everywhere. Texts, emails, social media. Rachel filed for divorce, taking Chad's house and half his business. His reputation collapsed overnight. Sarah came home in a fury that quickly turned to panic. You ruined me, my job, my friends, gone. You ruined yourself, I said. I just told the truth. I handed her an envelope, divorce papers. She trembled. You're asking for everything. No, I'm asking for what's mine, and my lawyer thinks I'll win easily. You can't afford a lawyer. I can now. I've started a business, digital forensics, helping people expose cheaters. You'd be amazed how much demand there is. Sarah looked at me like I was a stranger. You've become so cold. No, I just stopped being naive. You taught me what betrayal really costs. I walked to the door, then added, and you can't stay here. I changed the locks. The restraining order says 50 feet, minimum. I left her standing in ruins she'd made herself. Outside, the air felt clean for the first time in years. 6 months later, I had a new house, a thriving business, and someone in my life who valued honesty. Sarah was temping downtown, broke and disgraced. Chad had fled to another state, his reputation destroyed. The neighbors who'd turned on me tried to make amends. I let their apologies die unanswered. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding. The most satisfying part wasn't destroying them. It was knowing I hadn't lied, cheated, or broken the law. I'd just used the truth and let it do the work. Sometimes justice doesn't need a weapon, just a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.